So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, How to Grow Your Webinar Business Online. My name is Sylvie Lessard, and I am with the CFIB. Before we begin, I do have a few housekeeping items for you. First of all, on your control panel, you will see a questions section where you can type in any question that crosses your mind during the webinar. If you don't see the panel, please look for an orange arrow and click on it, and it should appear. We encourage you to enter your questions as you think of them so that we can address them at the end during the Q&A. I'll be monitoring this part of the platform. We will do our best to answer all the questions, and if we don't have time to, we will follow up once the webinar is done. Also in the control panel, under handouts, you'll see a copy of the PowerPoint slide from today's webinar, and you just need to click on the section handouts to open that and save the document. Next, I want you to know that you'll be receiving an email that will include a link to today's recorded session. You should be receiving that tomorrow. And please note, there will be a survey once the webinar ends. Now, for the reason that we're all here, we're thrilled to welcome Kevin Smith from Selectcom and Ryan Petrimoulx from the Story Architect today to present this webinar. Gentlemen, over to you.
Thank you, Sylvie. First, I want to address right off the top, the title and the theme of the webinar has changed slightly from growing your online business to the 7 deadly sins of e-commerce. And there's a very good reason behind that, and it's because my wife was buying shoes. She was buying some shoes that don't use animal products, and so she was looking for a particular type of shoe from a couple of particular online vendors, and she was finding it difficult to find the specific product she was looking for. She found an online store that had some shoes that didn't have animal products, and she was finding the experience of actually shopping on the site difficult. You know, there were some things that just weren't intuitive in how to shop. But most importantly, when she actually decided on the shoe that she wanted to purchase, it was the right size, the right color, the right style, she bought the shoe. And it took a little while to get through the cart process, but she finally got it ordered. And about 3 days after, the order was canceled. She got an email that said, sorry, the order's been canceled. This size wasn't available. Please try again. So she was frustrated. She went back. She looked at a different color of shoe with the size that she wanted, reordered it, and then a few days later, it was recanceled again. And so now she's really frustrated. She's trying to figure out how to reach their customer service. She's trying to figure out how to get in contact with them. It took a while. And when she finally got somebody on the phone to explain what happened, they actually had a bit of a flood in their warehouse and a lot of their stock was destroyed. But that stock wasn't updated on their website. Yeah, and this is just a small example of some of the things that can go wrong with building an online business. And as she was explaining this to me, she was like, they did all these things that if they just done better, would have made a much better experience. And so as Ryan and I were putting this together, we stuck with the theme of the 7 deadly sins to avoid. So just a little bit about myself quickly. My name is Kevin Smith. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer with Selectcom. Selectcom is one of the CFIB privileged partners. We provide telecom services and hosted phone systems at exceptional rates for CFIB members. I also wear many hats. So I'm also the Chief Story Architect at the Story Architect, which is a marketing firm that works with startups and small businesses. I also had spent 15 years at Dell Computers in B2C sales, B2B sales, enterprise marketing, and I work with a number of organizations that work with startups, helping them figure out how to grow and scale their businesses. So that would be Mars Discoveries District, the Rick Center, and a couple of other startup-focused organizations. And I'll let Ryan introduce himself.
Thanks a lot, Kevin. As you can see on the screen in front of you, my name is Ryan Petrimoulx. I also wear many hats. I am one of the lead story architects with the Story Architect, where I work with Kevin. We do a lot of brand building, storytelling, and also sort of like e-commerce projects as well. Previously, I've been a mentor in Grow Camp that's run through Mars, as well as the Google Startup Next program when Google rolled that out into Canada. In previous lives, I was the Chief of Logistics for World of Angus, which is a lifestyle company for dogs based as a pure play e-commerce company. I've also worked for West 49, which is owned by the YM Group, which you may be familiar with, as they also have under their main umbrella Blue Notes, Suzy Shear, and companies like that. I've also worked on the other side of things when it comes to payment processing, which is a very interesting market, with a company called Avid Retail. And that was recently acquired by Square and is now based out of Kitchener, Ontario. And I cut my teeth way back in the day, 12 years ago, with an apparel company based out of St. Catharines called Boathouse. And there I basically spun up their marketing and e-commerce departments and took their online business from 0 up into 7-figure annual revenue. So that's a little bit about me. Kevin?
So the first thing we wanted to focus on was pride. And this is probably one of the number one issues that we see when we work with companies looking to grow their online business. A lot of times they've already built a very beautiful looking online presence. But sometimes that has been built without considering the performance or the buying experience that the users would go through. What we did is we wanted to kind of take you through an example of a typical high fashion Yorkville store. Yorkville is a high fashion district in downtown Toronto, and we're not picking on any store in particular. We just kind of looked at some in random, but we did see that there's some very well built sites from an aesthetics point. You've got these stores have great products, and they're obviously trying to show these products in their best light. But there are some challenges with how the sites are actually structured. So one of the tools that we use to analyze sites is a tool called SE Optimer. And what this does is it will take a look at the site, it will analyze it, and it's trying to grade it on a number of factors, from the SEO capability, its usability, its performance, its social structure, and its security. Ryan, did you want to kind of comment on this?
Absolutely. So as you can see here, depending on the type of platform that you're using, there are basically two scenarios that you could most likely be in. Number one is that you've built up a website from scratch and you all, quote unquote, own all the code yourself. Or number two is you're using sort of a SaaS software as a service platform like Squarespace or Shopify. In the case of the latter, the usability and the security, those are pretty much hard-coded into those platforms. However, if you're building something yourself, let's say on WordPress or WooCommerce, those are issues that you're going to have to contend with on your own. Outside of those two factors, regardless as to how you build your site, the other three metrics that you're going to want to look at is your SEO, which is your search engine optimization, which is essentially how well Google can understand what your site is. Your performance, which is the big piece, which we'll talk about a little bit more in depth in this one, because this is what dramatically gets impacted by these choices. And your social, how well you're connected to your channels, if you're on everything, sort of what the engagement is like on there. So to narrow that all down, when you are building a site that is high fashion, quote unquote, Yorkville, where we're going with that is you're probably doing a lot of big photo shoots that are going to result in really, really well done photos. And using them just in their raw format is 100% going to cause performance issues, which is going to cascade into a number of other factors such as SEO and usability. Kevin, do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of interesting things that happen here. Google, when they're ranking your site, is using a number of things to make up their algorithm. We know that keywords is one of them, and most people are familiar with that. So they're thinking of building content and making sure that their content is optimized for the right keywords. But Google's algorithm has been getting more and more sophisticated. One of the things that Google is ranking is the user experience and performance. When you think about Google's job, their job is to provide searchers with relevant search results. And if someone goes to a site and then leaves immediately and comes back to Google and search, they know that that didn't work. And they will downrank that page if too many users leave it. Performance has a huge impact on that. I like to say that the human attention span right now is less than 7 seconds. A goldfish, by the way, has an attention span of 8 seconds. And so, we don't give pages a lot of attention. If it takes more than a few seconds to load, we're off to the next page. And if your performance is poor, what will happen is it'll take a long time to load and you'll lose more and more people coming in. But Google's taking note of that. Google has access to Google Analytics. They can see site performance. They measure this. And your page SEO will suffer because of your performance. The opposite is also true. If your performance is really good and users are sticking around, then Google will actually give you more, a higher ranking in SEO. So there's a combined effect of these two that are really, really important. Back to you, Ryan.
Yeah, so one of the main factors that you're going to want to look into is the way that your website sort of interacts and the difference between sort of product pages and lookbooks. You've dumped a lot of time, you've dumped a lot of effort, you've dumped a lot of money into making sure that you're getting those photos on your site in a way that they're representing the brand the way you want to see it. That being said, you 100% need to ensure that those photos are, for lack of a better word, optimized to be viewed on web. This leads really well into our recommendations. So if you're dealing with a photographer and spending hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on a photo shoot, the files that they give you, let's say the quote unquote raw files, those are going to be files that you can use pretty much anywhere. You could theoretically put them on your website. You can also expand them out and put them on a giant billboard. That being said, the manicuring that you need to do with those files gets down to ensuring that the images are compressed. And this is the case of resolution versus DPI. DPI stands for dots per inch. And essentially any file that you want to put on your website needs to be optimized for web, in that if the file is larger than a meg, one image is larger than a meg, it should be a couple kilobytes. That's going to result in much, much slower performance of your site. You also might want to consider using caching tools. Caching tools are essentially applications or apps that you can add into your website or widgets, let's say, that will automatically load certain assets so that if a user hits your homepage and loads up all the big fancy hero images that you have and then goes off to a different page, if they go back to the homepage, it's not reloading all of those. It's basically holding that in that user session. This sort of leads very well into the point of, much like when you're buying electronics, you want to shell out money for good hosting. For those of you that might not be familiar with it, the way hosting works is if you are in fact paying for hosting, which is basically where all the files for your website exist somewhere on a hard drive. There's a company out in, I believe it's in Vaughan, called Bluehost that a lot of Toronto companies use. That's where it sits. It sits in a server farm in Vaughan. And you want to make sure that you're picking a good host that keeps all their servers up to date, can handle traffic, will potentially alert you if there are traffic spikes, things like that. You might also want to consider using a CDN, which is a content distribution network. So, getting back to my last example, let's say you are using Bluehost up in Vaughan. If you've got a customer that's located in Brazil, let's say, that customer's computer has to reach all the way up to Vaughan to get those files. What a content distribution network does is it replicates the files on a different server that could be located in Texas or somewhere in South America, where it would take less time for those files to get to that end user. The other point to be very cognizant of is understanding, as I mentioned at the top, the difference between product pages and lookbooks. Product pages are the specific page that is highlighting one product, whereas a lookbook is more of a catalog, is more of a performative piece that your customers might not necessarily want to have to navigate through in order to buy a product. A lot of the times they're using, big fancy carousels, which will showcase the number of images, or a lot of JavaScript-based apps that will slow down the performance. And I will tee that up to Kevin, for Kevin to go into the don'ts.
Yeah, so on the don't side, we don't say use some overly fancy sliders and carousels. Some of these make your site look really, really good. Yeah, we've evaluated a few sites that had some really fancy kind of photo montages that were coming through. Problem is that they all put a huge drag on your performance. Even simple sliders, have a huge performance hit. So the recommendation is don't use any sliders. Keep it simple. Don't use photos that are excessively large files. That should be obvious now. But the other one is kind of don't use JavaScript. There are better tools that your web designers can use, HTML5, that load faster and operate faster than JavaScript. And just to reinforce that, JavaScript, just don't use it at all. The other thing is, don't get an overly customized website build. The more customization, the more plugins, the more things you put in your website, usually the more complex that it gets, and the more time it takes to load. So the rule will be keep it as simple as possible. So moving on to our next challenge. The next challenge is desire. And what we kind of group here is the idea that as online retailers, we have a desire for traffic. And that's what we usually hear from our clients. I need traffic to my site. The challenge sometimes comes without having a really good cost-effective plan to get it. And what do we mean by that? Well, we kind of see some things that happen when people are just looking at a traffic number. Part of the issue that comes up is they may not have necessarily well-defined a target market, and so they're trying to get a pretty broad base of customers to come to their site. And the general rule is the broader the market that you're trying to attract, the more expensive it's going to be to attract that market. The other thing we see is that customers aren't sure what strategy to use to get traffic. And so they're trying everything. We see this, what we call a spray and pray approach. I'm going to be on every social media platform. I'm going to try every banner ad company. I'm going to try every search engine. I'm going to try every marketplace. And I'm just going to see what works. And they end up spending a lot more money than they need to get traffic to their site. And this runs into a lack of understanding of who their real customers are, how they buy, what the real path to find that traffic is, and really what the ROI for that would be. So when we talk to customers about finding traction and finding customers, we have some recommendations that we'll look at. And I'll walk through the do's and I think Ryan will walk through the don'ts on this one. So we tend to recommend to do some type of buyer persona and customer discovery even before you start running some advertising campaigns. You do want to get a sense of who you think your target customer is going to be, and potentially to talk to some of those customers and really find out how they are going to market. What channels are effective, what they pay attention to, which social media platforms they spend the most time on. Some of that basic research can be really helpful in finding out what the right path to getting traction might be. The next step that we look at is testing some of these channels, and we like to say the rule would be to test paid channels first. The goal that we have is really trying to figure out what channels and content is going to work. So in all of these channels, there's usually a paid and an unpaid ability to scale the channel. If you're thinking of Google, you can buy Google ads before you optimize for SEO. With Facebook, you can create viral posts, but you can also boost those posts. The challenge is that the unpaid channels take a lot of effort and a lot of time to build properly. If you're thinking of a specific set of keywords, it could take you a few months to build real SEO traffic for those keywords. But if you've targeted the wrong ones, that work has gone to waste. By running some small paid test campaigns first, you can very quickly learn which keywords are going to be effective and which ones are not, or which types of posts on Facebook or Instagram are going to work and which ones are not. And then you can start to convert that into a mix of paid and unpaid marketing campaigns. To follow on to that traffic, we'd recommend to encourage and support your referral business. And that means giving your customers a reason to tell other people about your products, making them part of your email campaigns, asking them to share your content socially. A key strategy would be to collect email addresses at multiple stages of the buying process. Once a customer's expressed interest, find a way to collect emails. Once they've purchased a product, collect those emails and use them as part of follow-on campaigns so that customers continue to buy more or they continue to spread the word about your product. Ryan, what should you not do?
Well, there's a couple things. And just quickly before that, I'll jump back to one of the most underused drip campaign types in e-commerce right now is the abandoned cart funnel. And that's definitely something that anyone should be considering that's selling something online. When it comes to the don'ts, number one, don't do paid ads without understanding your unit economics. You want to know what your targeted return on cost is for a specific campaign. The key thing is once you do those tests and you start figuring things out, you need to pour money into that once you've refined the keywords and you know what works. One of the excellent resources that Sylvie sent out through the chat is a company called ClearBank, and that was founded by Michelle Romanoff from Dragon's Den. And ClearBank essentially acts as a bank specifically for e-commerce companies to support their marketing efforts. So that's definitely something to look into. Another point to get into is do not blindly post content on social media that requires some level of monitoring. Realistically, you should be doing some level of monitoring for your social posts, but jumping into the Me Too movement and loading up a bunch of posts on something like Hootsuite and then just letting it run could result in a potentially disastrous situation. So if you're going to post something on your social channels, make sure that you're on top of the interaction, because after all, that's what it's for. Which leads into the next point quite well of your goal on social media shouldn't be always to be selling. You should be aiming for a 60-20-20 ratio. So 60% your own content, 20% content that's curated, that you think will resonate with your customers, and 20%, hey, you should buy this thing. If your social posts are always buy this, buy this, buy this, you're not going to have good engagement with your customers. The other point too is do not ever buy followers or likes. I've seen this happen on both ends. It's usually you end up getting a bunch of what's essentially non-qualified traffic that does not engage with your brand at all and really messes up your analytics metrics. The final point is this isn't Field of Dreams. This is not something where if you just build a website, all of your customers will inherently know about it and they will flock to you. These are tools that you're using. Your social channels are tools. Your website is a tool. These are tools that you need to properly use. Just because I go to Rona and spend thousands of dollars on tools doesn't mean I'm going to be able to build a house. You need to put the effort into actually making that happen. Kevin?
Excellent. So sometimes what we hear from our customers is, I'm just going to look at what my competitors are doing, and I'm going to copy what they're doing, because if it's working for them, it should work for me. And that's not always the case. When it comes to social media, there's some rules that we really should follow. And one of them is always be authentic. I think the thing to kind of keep in mind when it comes to social media, it can be a great channel for finding customers and getting traffic. If we're really successful at engaging with people on the channels that they use, and it's not, we're doing it without a lot of cost, that can make it very cost effective to bring traffic in. But unfortunately, what we tend to see is a lot of Me Too content. My competitor has created some articles. I'm going to copy the same articles and I'm going to post them out. I'm going to post a lot of offers on my channel, and we tend to see that instead of there being a lot of authentic conversations, there's a lot of marketing. And in these channels, we have to kind of be aware that we have to kind of follow the rules of the channels and what our users will expect. So we don't want to be too sales focused. We want a content that is going to be useful or interesting or entertaining with our audience. We want to make sure that the content is not just going to be a one-sided post, but it should be engaged and interactive and communicative. I was having a chat this morning with one of our someone who's going to be a social media manager for us, and on the Selectcom, we don't have a Twitter account, and the reason we don't is not a lot of our customers spend a lot of time on Twitter. More of our customers spend time on LinkedIn, and we didn't have the resources to spend time monitoring and engaging with people in that channel. It's really easy to just copy content and post it, but we didn't want to jump in without being able to interact and respond. And so, we need to be careful about how we use social media as a channel. We would recommend building a bit of a plan and sticking to it. And that means thinking about what channels you want to be in, where your customers are spending their time, what conversations are relevant to them, what information is going to be useful, and planning it out. And sticking to it to the point where you're getting the content out, but you're not so stuck to it that you're only posting that content. Things will change within a 3-month plan, so you should be able to respond to that. You should be able to understand your sales cycle as it relates to your customers. How long is what is the average time that it takes someone to be interested in a product to actually making a purchase? Sometimes it's a spur of the moment thing and you need content that relates to that. Sometimes people need more education and more thought before they're ready to buy. Another big one is knowing when your key selling dates are. If you're a flower shop and your key selling dates are going to be Valentine's Day and Mother's Day, you should be well prepared in advance of those dates to have content, to be responding, to really be paying attention to what your users are going to be interested in. Yeah, you should be starting conversations and not just responding to the conversations that are coming your way. There are lots of great examples of companies that have kind of taken charge on social media to really get engagement going. Yeah, and really know the rules of engagement of your channel. Yeah, there are some channels where going in and posting a bunch of videos would be obnoxious, and other channels where that would be welcomed. Yeah, so just be careful about the type of channel that you're playing with.
So moving on to the don'ts. Number one, don't be afraid to be wrong. Most retailers that I work with, you mentioned social media and their eyes get huge because it's a terrifying concept. Don't be afraid to be wrong, and don't get flustered and forget to breathe. Everything's fine. This is just a communication platform. There's a lot of things happening in the news where large companies or even small companies, they do a big misstep and then it seems like they don't recover from it. In most cases, but not all of them, that's the result of companies being reactive and not starting conversations, and also not sort of engaging their customers and getting them used to you engaging with them and starting those conversations. So then when something goes, a little off from center, a little sideways, everyone gets tense and then people start getting reactive. You need to get into this like it's a warm bath because it's not going anywhere anytime soon. So if you're not good at it, put the time in, try and understand it better. The other point is your competition isn't out to get you in most cases. I'm sure there are some outlier edge cases out there where there's incredible levels of competition, but that's most likely not you. Your competition is just trying to do the best that they can, and if that means pulling a little bit of market share from you, that's just market share that you can pull back from them. Healthy competition will result in everyone doing better overall. Another big point to mention is if something happens, let's say on Facebook, and someone has an issue with a product or a service or an experience or anything like that, taking the conversation offline immediately and trying to get them, oh God, I don't want to see me talking to this irate customer about this experience that they had. I'll get them on the phone, I'll email them, I will take this offline so not everyone can see it. That's usually not the best strategy. You want to show your customers how you engage with issues, because that's going to show them what kind of retailer that you are. The final point is, don't forget to learn from your mistakes, because if you don't, you're just going to have them come up over and over again. This is not a race. This is a marathon. Get used to it. So that leads us into our next slide. RAS, dealing with your low conversion rates. So this is something that pretty much every single e-commerce customer or any e-commerce project that I've ever dealt with anyone, conversion rate has always been a thing that's come up. Now, just to clarify, your conversion rate is the percentage that comes out to see the overall metric of how your site is doing. A lot of the times, issues with conversion rates, more often than not, they come from a checkout experience, which is why this is the #1 point. The advantage of that is, as I mentioned, some of those pre-built e-commerce templates, they have the checkout process is sort of hard-coded in, and it's pretty bulletproof. There are some modifications you can make to it, but that's usually one of the reasons for a poor conversion rate. You've also potentially got the wrong products or the right products that are displayed poorly. Collections not being set up properly, a on-site search function that isn't intuitive or potentially doesn't even exist, or just doesn't work for how your customers are looking for things. Wrong price points, whether it comes to your products or whether it comes to shipping, because often that's a big contributing factor. If in the checkout process, people get slammed with this giant shipping charge that they didn't expect, you lose them. Your conversion rate goes down. Poor photos are also a very, very large problem. Photos are always going to be something that you're going to have to be updating and constantly trying to do your best job of. Another point on this is, and something that's interesting on this point, is Shopify has recently rolled out, or is in the process of rolling out, the ability to do augmented reality and 3D modeling with their products. The case they use is a baby stroller, which are ridiculously expensive, up in the thousands of dollars, and incredibly difficult to purchase online. They now have the ability that you can send that product off to a 3D modeler, and the files you get back for them, you can now upload that onto your website and provide a movable 3D image of that product that your customer can try and get the look and feel of. You can read more about the things that Shopify rolled out like that and other things at their developer conference that happened last week in Toronto called Shopify Unite in an article that I just published on BetaKit, which the link for which is also in the chat. Another point that could result in poor conversion is bad or no descriptions. I want to know specific things about the dimensions or specs of this product. And if I can't find that out, I'm going to be less likely to pull the trigger and buy something. So those are just 5 things that could be a multitude of things when it comes to dealing with conversion rate optimization. So I'll hand it off to Kevin to take care of some of the do's when it comes to dealing with your low conversion rate.
Yeah, so some of the do's, you really want to understand your metrics. The first thing, you should be measuring what's happening across the entire funnel for your customers. So if you know that you've got traffic coming in, but it's bouncing from your site, that's one problem. If you have traffic coming in, but people aren't putting things in their shopping cart, that may indicate a different problem. If people are putting things in their shopping cart, but they're not checking out, again, that could be another problem. If you don't have metrics to track your users across your site, you won't have the insight to know which problem to go and fix. Some other things to kind of consider would be, for people who might be abandoning at the checkout cart, would be to use drip campaigns. If you've captured their email, being able to email them a, hey, come back and shop again email is really important. If you don't have their email, you should consider ad reroll or ad retargeting. If you've ever tried to buy a toaster on Amazon and then found that that toaster is following you around the internet, that's what ad retargeting is. It uses some information to figure out where somebody's going and will target ads based on what they had looked at on your site. Those are very effective. The other things are to try things like site pop-ups. So as somebody's looking to move away from the site, a pop-up comes up that presents them with an offer or some other reason to shop again. And you can also use things like A/B testing and heat mapping tools to really try and understand what may be the cause of an issue of somebody not buying on your site. Ryan, what are some of the don'ts?
I mean, the big one right out of the gate, don't overcharge on shipping. Shipping is often referred to as the last mile. This is something that we'll talk about again later. But as I mentioned before, you don't want to sell fantastic products, do an excellent job getting your customer interested and wanting to buy it, and then they get to the shipping and they are just the sticker shock from that price for me to get that product just drives them away. There are many features right now. I believe Canada Post has an API that you can plug into, I'm pretty sure, every single incarnation of an e-commerce site that allows you to pull your live shipping rate and send that off to your customer. Ideally, that's sort of where you want to go with something like that, or just standardize shipping costs by province. Point number 2 is don't use an overly complex buying path. You'll notice, and I don't love using this as an example, but you'll notice on Amazon, if you add something to your cart and then hit the checkout process, a lot of the navigation that is present throughout your entire experience on Amazon disappears. That top nav bar goes away once you hit the checkout process because you've got people on a path and you want them to keep going. That doesn't mean they can't get back, but you don't necessarily want to have the same kind of quote-unquote breadcrumbs that lead people back out of the checkout process. The big thing is do not get hyper-focused or obsessive on your conversion rates. Your conversion rate percentage is a conglomeration of a bunch of different factors. You can't directly impact your conversion rates. You need to work on those 3 factors that come into play, and that will hit your conversion rate. Next point is when you're doing conversion rate optimization, you want to test one thing at a time. Whether it's changing the color of the checkout button from, there was a study that was done, I can't even remember when, years ago, that found that there is a conversion rate optimization different from having a red button versus a green button. It wasn't a big lift. It was, less than 1%, but you want to do a bunch of little things that are going to result in that lift. Which then brings in the next point of, it's usually not one singular thing. It's not like you forgot to flip one switch and that's why nothing's working. It's usually a collection of things that you need to sort of test out, which is why conversion rate optimization it's a real grind. The other point too is don't be afraid to let go of the sale. If you have a bricks and mortar retail and you've got a customer that you literally just cannot, they're in your store and you cannot make them happy, at some point you're going to get to the stage where it's just like, you know what, I don't think this is going to work for you then. And I can recommend other places that you can go and maybe try and find what you're looking for. But at some point, you need to be focused on retaining the customers that are going to come back and shop with you again. And if you have to overextend yourself to try and get that sale, that customer is always going to have that level of expectation. And now on to gluttony. Kevin, do you want to take this?
Yeah, so I think the idea here is that you can't hoard your inventory across channels. So if you think back to the story that I told about my wife, part of the issue that she had was that there's inventory listed on the website, but it was incorrect. The website was saying that there was stock available for the product that she wanted, and it wasn't. You can have the opposite problem happen where you have stock of a product, but your website is showing that it's not occurring. And this can happen, especially for those retailers who are mixing inventory between their online stores and their brick and mortar locations. It's always challenging to figure out how much stock do I keep in my store and how much stock do I make available for online purchases. And if it runs out on the online store, how do I decide to move stock from my brick and mortar location? And if I've if I've automated it, how do I get that information to go across? And a lot of times what we run into is the inventory is not tied into any kind of point of sale system. So as orders are being consumed in one location, they're not being updated across the other ones. And so this can present issues both in store and online. So I think if you have this situation, then we would recommend to use a point of sale system that can integrate with an e-commerce platform and can push the data across so that as people are buying in your store, it can accurately reflect the inventory and share it across all of your channels. If you can have one source of data, you're going to have a better experience for your customers. You should understand, how those products sell differently on different channels. You may find that that some products move faster and some products move slower, and so you should be ready to understand how is that going to be purchased. You should make it easy for your customers to know what stock is available. If there is stock, they should be able to find it. And this may require you to spend a bit of time looking at some software tools, some online e-commerce tools, and other services that can help with that. Ryan, do you want to kind of pick up from there?
Sure. Some of the big notes on this is don't silo your businesses. Your brick and mortar retail and your e-commerce channel, those are sales channels, and you need to try and do what you can to give them the weight that they deserve. If you just try and carve off a percentage of your inventory and sell that online, That's fine. That's fine. However, you're really not giving it the dedication that you need to be able to do that. And in 2019, there are a number of options out there that will allow you to bridge all your inventory, what you've got in your warehouse to what you've got in your store or stores and what you've got available online, to avoid the situation that Kevin came across at the top of the call. Leads into the second point. Don't do it halfway. There are APIs, there are platforms, there are 3PLs, there are warehousing solutions. There are the tools out there in order to make this work. Some are obviously better than others, and it can seem like a daunting task. And that's pretty much, we could talk about this in its own webinar, which, you know, depending on the response, is something that we may do. Point number 3, don't make too many assumptions about what will or won't sell online. Essentially, like I said, these are different sales channels, and you have to essentially let your customers tell you how they want to purchase your products and where they want to do that. And don't make it a pain for your customer to buy from you. The example that Kevin gave, I think we can all agree that that sounds like a pain. The amount of money it takes to acquire a customer and give them a good experience is X. The amount of money it takes to acquire a customer, then you lose them, then you have to get them back, increases threefold. It becomes that much more difficult to reacquire that customer after they've had a bad experience with you. So you want to try and make this as bulletproof as possible out of the gate. It's not going to work for everybody, but you want to hit that meaty chunk of your customer base. And this loops back to something that I mentioned before. Don't forget your limitations. If you start doing special orders for products because a customer reaches out to you, cool. If that's easy for you to do, then do it. If that is a giant pain, be prepared for that customer to always expect that, and be prepared for that customer to let all of their friends know that that's the experience they had and that's the expectation that you set. So be very mindful of what you will or won't do. And as I mentioned before, don't be afraid to let go of the sale if it works outside of your comfort zone. Kevin, back to you.
I think that fits next with this next sin, which is sloth, and that's being lazy on customer service. Yeah, it's inevitable that something is going to go wrong, or your customers are going to have questions as they're buying products. Yeah, you can do as good a job as possible of putting information out there, but at some point you'll need to respond to people. And so sometimes what we see happening is people make themselves available on every channel. And so yeah, you're on Facebook, you're on Twitter, you're on Instagram, you're on Etsy, you're on Pinterest, you have a phone number, you have a chat thing, you have an SMS thing, and it becomes impossible to route customer inquiries in an efficient way. And what ends up happening is that you miss some, and you're going to make customers upset. It's best to set boundaries with customers so that when they do have a question, they've got a very predictable path of how to get to that. Or if they do have a problem, there's a very predictable path of how that problem is going to be dealt with. You have to understand who isn't your customer. You may have customers who aren't really ideal customers that you've inadvertently targeted, and they're not happy with the experience because the product isn't for them. You should be trying to turn your negative customer experiences into positive customer experiences. Some of the best examples that we've seen of dealing with customer service issues is that if you go over and above helping them, you can turn somebody that was very negative into a champion. And you need to monitor your reviews. Your reviews are going to span good reviews, bad reviews, ugly reviews. You want to make sure that there are good, authentic reviews to balance out the bad and the ugly. And here, what we recommend is make sure that you are capturing those good customer experiences as well as responding to bad customer experiences. So, Ryan, what are some of the do's that people should do?
Realistically, one of the big things is set the tone, cadence, and structure of how you're going to respond. A lot of people rely solely on email, which presents its own problem, or let's say Facebook. A good thing to do if you're getting emails into your customer service points is do an autoresponder. Say that, send a message back whenever you get an email that says, we've received it, we'll get in touch with you within 24 business hours. That sort of makes the customer feel like they're not yelling into the void. If you're doing this on Facebook, there's a number of chatbots that you can integrate into your Facebook Messenger that will do that exact thing and more, possibly. There are also chatbots that you can integrate onto your site that will help minimize the customer service load that you're dealing with. Consider using a ticketing system, something like Zendesk. Zendesk does the exact sort of autoresponder that I was talking about, and it also allows you to keep track of those customer service points that come up. Build a FAQ, a frequently asked question. That is a page that exists on your website where you aggregate the popular questions that you're getting, and that could lead your customer to read and get their question answered before they reach out to you. Have your policies clear, accessible, and understandable. If you don't do special orders, I'll just keep picking on that for a minute. If you don't do special orders, you can call that out, and you can give a reason why. If you don't do free returns, there it is right there. Or if you do free returns, definitely include that, because that will help customers answer their own questions. On the note of returns, hassle-free returns drive business. That's the end of the day. I'm not going to get into the case of Zappos, but if you want to look into that and the Zappos way of doing returns, that's what helped accelerate their business. You want to make it as easy as possible for your customers to buy from you, and if they don't like it, send it back. And be clear with your boundaries. This is what I can do. I unfortunately can't do X. Again, don't be afraid to lose those customers that are going to have demands that you can't meet, and try and find a different way of handling it. I'll pass this back to Kevin for the don'ts.
Yeah, the first one is don't take it personally. There are customers that will purposely try and push your buttons because they're hoping to get a better discount. And there are also customers who will push your buttons because your response creates interesting social media content for them, which they will post on Reddit and Facebook and everywhere else. You always want to be professional when responding to customers. Don't outsource your customer service if you can avoid it. You really should own the customer service for two really important reasons. One, you're going to respond better than anybody outsourced to your company. You will be able to have better answers by having more innate knowledge of your own products and processes. But at the same time, it's also a huge opportunity to learn why your customers are having issues and how you can improve your products and your process in the meantime. Don't discount your customer feedback. Really listen to what they're saying and figuring out what is at the root of some of the negative experience. And don't view it as inherently negative. Any customer inquiry is an opportunity to improve that customer relationship. And there's huge opportunities to create real ambassadors with customers that have had issues. The last one is don't rely solely on email or chat. Sometimes customers are going to want to talk to somebody. And I want to share with you an example of one of Selectcom's customers, and this is also a CFIB customer. This is a company called Flowers by the Dozen. They're a flower shop, and they have multiple locations. And as you can imagine, during the busy times of the year, they get lots and lots of phone calls. They have customers shopping online. They have customers who have questions. They want to change their order. They want to add something special, and so they want to talk to somebody. And what they were running into is because they had all of these locations, they couldn't balance the load of calls between them. So some locations may not be getting any calls, and other locations would be so overloaded that calls would be missed and dropped. And so, they were finding that just it just wasn't working well. And what they did is they came to us to implement a cloud phone solution that gave them some really important things. One, it gave them one phone number to call. That one phone number could simultaneously ring all of their locations. So instead of having to have the customer choose one, they could just have one number to go everywhere. That allows them to balance the calls between locations. It has automatic call queues set up. People can pick up an answer from wherever location they're in. They can also answer if they're at a thing like a farmer's market. And so this gave them real location independence, and it allowed them to really respond to these peak periods. And so you really want to balance out email with other communication channels. So those are some of the sins that we saw in customers looking to grow their retail sales. So now we'll pause here and we'll check to see if there are any questions.
Perfect timing. So Sylvie here, I'm back. We do have a couple of questions. The first one is, we're thinking of taking our brick and mortar to add an e-store. Considering that we are a family business and put in long hours already, will we have to engage more staff to maintain the site and the communication, attend to the communication, I guess is what they're trying to say.
So
I'll jump in on that one.
Yeah, go ahead.
If that's okay, Kevin. Yeah. So yeah, just looking at the question now, I've personally seen this question come up many times, and it's whether or not you like how do we do this? How do we set this up? A lot of the time, and this is sort of the direction that things are going now with a lot of these software as a service platforms like Shopify or Squarespace or things like that. It's easy enough to do to spin up a Shopify store. Shopify's made it pretty bulletproof for you to sign up and get an account and start selling. But it turns into, how do you grow that business? You will again, you're adding another sales channel. If you opened a new store, you would have to staff it as well. The key thing to remember at this point is, okay, do I bring someone in-house to help me do this? Or do I outsource it? That's usually where this conversation gets to. Bringing someone in-house, definitely a move that a lot of people do. It definitely works, and there are a lot of people doing it. The other side of that is, it depends on how quickly you want this thing to work and what your timelines look like. Bringing someone in that sort of quote unquote knows what they're doing, that's going to be an expensive thing. It might not break the bank, but it's going to be a very immersive and expensive process. What a lot of places do, and something that Kevin and I do, is essentially work with clients to get that rolled out properly, and spend that money smartly, as opposed to just spending it on, I think this is what we need to do. We come in and sort of say, okay, here's the move. This is how we're going to do it. We're going to architect this out. So to put a more fine point on that, yeah, you are definitely going to have to engage someone to do it, because you're adding another sales channel. Kevin, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that was perfect.
Great.
Okay.
Any other questions?
We've got one last one. We're looking to replace RMS. We do about $225,000 per year with a single till and 1 or 2 trade shows. Any recommendation for a cost-effective replacement?
I'm guessing RMS is a POS system?
Or a retail management software.
Yeah.
Got it. I mean, I can jump in quickly on that one. It is a POS system, person's confirmed. Gotcha, great. Yeah. There's a number of factors out there, and it's interesting because a lot of the times we see people that are getting to the point where their point of sale inventory management system, it's getting to the point where we need to change it. And if they're also looking at adding sort of the e-commerce piece to it as well, there are platforms out there right now that can handle everything and handle it well. Some of the other things that were announced at Shopify Unite, just to use that as an example, is building out the actual physical technology to replicate an Apple Store experience where you could essentially walk in, grab something off the shelf, someone can walk up to you, you tap your credit card on their phone, and you're out the door. There are 100% cost-effective replacements out there. It really depends on what type of business you have in the retail space.
Okay.
Kevin,
Yeah,
anything to add?
I was going to say I've been seeing a number of startups that are in the kind of SaaS POS space. So a couple of names I can't remember off the top of my head, but I've run into some of them at some of these startup organizations, and some of them look pretty interesting. Yeah,
and I would, on the note of sort of both of those questions, if that's something that that either of those people or anyone else that those questions resonate with, if that's something that they want to reach out to us, Kevin or myself after the call, those are questions that we typically get and can very, very easily answer.
Okay, so terrific. Gentlemen, I'd like to thank you for your time today. To everyone out there, thank you for participating. If you have been unable to get a copy of the handout under the handout section, please make sure that you request one during the survey that will be displayed once the webinar ends. So have a great day, everybody, and we will now end the webinar.